So, good morning, everyone. My name is Arafat. I teach history on the textbook platform. So, in this session, let us discuss a very important topic of modern Indian history, that is the permanent land revenue system. So, permanent land revenue system. So, this topic is important both for prelims, is also important from mains point of view. At the point. So very important topic. Let us discuss the various aspects of this particular topic, that is permanent land revenue system. So the point is land revenue was an important source of income during the British time period, and therefore the British had taken adequate care in organizing the land revenue administration. Let me repeat. Land revenue was an important source of income during the British period, and therefore the British had taken adequate care in organizing land revenue administration. So the point is the land revenue administration during the British time period was not uniform throughout the country. The land revenue administration during the British times was not uniform throughout the country. In other words, the British had not implemented only one land revenue system. In fact, during the British times, there were three different land revenue systems in existence in India. So, for example, the British had introduced three different land revenue systems. One was the Zamindari system. One is the Zamindari system, the topic of today's discussion. And this system was introduced in the year 1793 AD. 1793 AD. And second is what is called as the Ryotwari system, which was introduced by the British in 1820 AD. And third is we have a system called the Mahalwari system, which was introduced in the year 1833. So the point is the land revenue system was not uniform across the country during the British times. Altogether, three different land revenue systems were in operation during the British times. Of course, these three different land revenue systems were operational in different parts of the country. Three different land revenue systems were operational in different parts of the country. The point. But altogether, three such systems were introduced during the British times. So the topic of today's discussion is the first land revenue system, that is the Zamindari system. So this is the topic which we will be discussing in today's class. On this topic, the Zamindari system is today's topic of discussion. So in some other classes, we can have a discussion on the Ryotwari system and Mahalwari system, but now let us discuss the Zamindari system. So before we discuss the Zamindari system, take a brief, let us take a look at the history of East India Company. Let us take a look at how the East India Company ended up becoming a territorial power in India. So basically, the East India Company was a British company, and it was founded in the year 1600 AD. Was founded in England in 1600 AD, and its main objective, its primary objective, was to trade with the Eastern world, to trade with the Eastern world in general, particularly with India. Primary aim was to trade with Asia and particularly with India. That was the objective with which the East India Company was founded in the year 1600 AD. So basically, the East India Company uh, landed in India in the year 1608 and established its first settlement in India at Surat. At Surat, which is an important place in Gujarat. So basically, it was in the year 1608 that the British came to India and established their first settlement at Surat. In course of time, the British went on to establish numerous such settlements in different parts of the country. So, for example, Madras was their settlement, Bombay was also their settlement, Calcutta was also their settlement. Is the settlement of the English East India Company. The point. So basically, this company came to India in 1608. It came to India primarily for trade, and it began establishing its settlements in different parts of the country. But over a period of time, the East India Company began to grow militarily. East India Company, which is basically a company of traders, over a period of time began to grow militarily. The company began to have its own private army, and this private army of the basically the East India Company in course of time began to have its own private army, and in course of time it began to involve in the local politics. It also began to indulge in wars, and in course of time it succeeded in defeating the local rulers of India, went on to become the political master. The point. So basically, initially this company came to India only for trade, but gradually it began to build up its own army. It began to uh, involve in the local politics. It also began to fight wars. One such war which the East India Company fought was a war known as the Battle of Plassey, that was in the year 1757 AD. So 1757 AD, this was the first major battle fought by the British in India with the local rulers. Of course, before 1757 itself, East India Company fought numerous wars in India, but with their European rivals. For example, it is not just the British, French also had their settlements. So by 1757 itself, the French East India Company was basically the French company, and English East India Company, that is the British company, uh, were involved in numerous wars. Of course, the French were defeated, and the British had their upper hand in India. So the point is, even before 1757, the British had fought wars in India, but not with the local rulers, but with their European competitors who were operating in it. But the first major war fought by the British in India with the local ruler happened to be Battle of Plassey in the year 1757 AD. So this Battle of Plassey was fought between a Bengal ruler by name Sirajuddaulah. So this Battle of Plassey was fought between a Bengal ruler by name Sirajuddaulah and the British. This war, Siraj was defeated. Up a point in this war, basically Siraj was defeated by the British. But the point is, after the Battle of Plassey, that is after the British success in the Battle of Plassey, the British did not occupy Bengal. After their success in the Battle of Plassey, the British did not occupy Bengal. In fact, between 1757 to 1772, the British ruled Bengal indirectly through their puppet rulers. Point is, the British made the locals, the natives of India, as the rulers of Bengal, and tried to rule Bengal indirectly. At the point. So the point is, after the Battle of Plassey, the British did not take over the administration of Bengal. In fact, after the Battle of Plassey, 1757 till 1772, the British tried to rule Bengal through their puppet rulers. It was only in the year 1772 AD that the British felt emboldened and finally took over the entire administration of Bengal. So the whole point which I'm trying to convey is, it was in the year 1772 AD that the British finally transformed from being a trading company to a territorial power. Was in the year 1772 AD that the British finally transformed from being just a trading power to a territorial power, trading company to a territorial power. This happened basically in the year 1772 AD. 1772 AD. That's the point. So the point is immediately after becoming the territorial power in Bengal, the British started collecting land revenue directly from the peasants of Bengal. Let me repeat this point once again. So as soon as the British became the territorial power in Bengal in 1772 AD, that is, as soon as the British or the English East India Company got transformed from just a trading company to a territorial power in the year 1772, immediately thereafterwards, the East India Company started collecting land revenue from the peasants of Bengal. And in this connection, the East India Company introduced a system known as a bidding system. Bidding system. At the point. So the point is, the topic of today's discussion is a Zamindari system. But before we discuss the Zamindari system, let us discuss a few details that are very much related to the Zamindari system. So basically, it was in the year 1772 AD, the British got transformed from a trading company to a territorial power. Immediately, they started collecting land revenue. In this connection, the British started uh, a system known as a bidding system. Bidding system, and this bidding system was in existence between 1772 AD to 1793, 1772 AD to 1793 AD. So, what is this bidding system? Basically, under this system, under the bidding system, the entire agricultural land that was available in Bengal was available under the control of the British was divided into large estates. Basically, under the bidding system, the entire land, that is the agrarian land, the agricultural land that was under the control of the British, was divided into large parcels called estates. These were basically divided into estates. So, for example, this entire Bengal region came under the control of the British. This entire Bengal region was divided into large parcels called estates. Each of these boxes, say, roughly represents an estate. Estate 1, estate 2, at a point. So basically, they divided the land into large parcels and declared them as estates. So thereafterwards, each of these estates was put up for auction. Each of these estates was then put up for the auction by the British. Then any individual, whether be it a Britisher or the native of India, was allowed to participate in the auction process. Any individual, no matter who he is, whether he is an Indian or a Britisher, anyone was allowed to participate in the bidding, the auction or bidding process. So any individual was allowed to participate in the auction process or in the bidding process. At one point. So normally the highest bidder in the auction. So usually the highest, not usually, the highest bidder in the auction uh, was given the right by the British to collect land revenue from the peasants of that estate for a period of 1 year. So basically bidding was conducted and the highest bidder in the auction was given the right to collect the land revenue from the peasants of that estate where the bidding happened for a period of 1 year. So for example, estate 1, say this is estate 1 is put for auction, and anyone who wins this bidding anyone who quotes the highest price in the bidding uh, will be given the right to collect land revenue from the peasants of that estate for a period of about 1 year. And the same process would continue the following year. The second year, once again, the bidding will be conducted, and anyone who quotes the highest price in the bidding will get the right to collect the land revenue from the peasants of that particular estate for 1 more year. This process went on. The point. And this system was introduced in the year 1772 AD, and it remained in operation till 1793 AD. This was the system. So the point is, on the whole, this paper appeared to benefit the British. On the whole, this system seems to benefit, it appeared to benefit the British. This was because the British were not required to collect any revenue officials to collect the taxes from the people, because at the beginning of the year, the British would just put the land for auction, and whosoever quotes the highest price in the auction, uh, such highest bidders in the auction had to deposit lump sum money with the British, and thereafterwards the highest bidder would then get the right to collect taxes from the people of that estate for 1 year. At a point. So the point is, on paper, this system appeared to benefit the British because the British were not required to maintain any revenue officials to collect land revenue. That is point number one. Second, the British would get the auction amount right at the beginning of the year to lump sum amount. So therefore, this system appeared to benefit the British. It appeared as if it benefited the British. But the fact of the matter was, this system neither benefited the British nor it benefited the peasants. So no one, in fact, this system neither was beneficial to the British nor was it beneficial to the peasants, that is, the actual cultivators of the land. In fact, there were many defects in particular. Now let us take a look at the defects of this particular system. Take a look at the defects of this system. So the first defect of this bidding system or auction system, that it actively promoted corruption. It actively promoted corruption. So there was a lot of corruption in the bidding process itself. This was because the bidding process was never transparent. The bidding process was never transparent, and in most cases, the bidding was rigged. The bidding process itself was rigged. Mostly, the friends, the family members, and relatives of the British officers participated in the bidding. Let me repeat. In most cases, I just told you that the bidding process was not transparent. The bidding process was rigged. The point is, the relatives, the friends, and family members of the British officers participated in this bidding process and took away the most fertile land at throwaway prices. The point being, the bidding was not allowed to take place in a transparent manner. The bidding was rigged. The family members, the relatives, the friends of the British officers, that is the officers of East India Company, participated in this bidding process and took away the best lands, the most fertile lands at almost throwaway prices. That's the point. So therefore, in this system, the officers of East India Company benefited, or at least the friends, relatives, family members of the officers of East India Company benefited, but East India Company itself was a major loser, because the point is, when the bidding is not allowed to take place in transparent manner, when the bidding is not conducted in a transparent manner, obviously, uh, The point is, the East India Company. The point is, since the bidding was not taking place in transparent manner, the East India Company was not getting any major money, but the officers of East India Company were making lots and lots of money. So basically, the system, the the bidding system, the bidding system led to lot of corruption. It resulted in a severe loss of revenue to the East India Company. EIC meaning East India. So it resulted in loss of revenue to the East India Company. So this was the first major defect of this system. Then the second major defect of this system was it resulted in lot of exploitation of the peasants. Resulted in exploitation of the peasants. This was because the bidders, the auction, that is the bidders, uh, after winning the auction, uh, they're only the winners of the auction, that is the bidders, had only one aim, that is to collect as much revenue as possible from the peasants. That was their only objective. So they had absolutely no concern for the welfare of the actual cultivator of the land. Basically, the bidders, individuals who had won the auction, absolutely had no concern for the actual cultivators of the land, that is the peasants. Their only aim was to make or to collect as much money as possible from the peasants. So therefore, the the bidders, that is the individuals who had won the auction, they began exploiting the peasants. They began collecting uh, the land revenue. They were collecting land revenue at a very the land revenue rate was very high. It is a exorbitant taxes were imposed on the peasants at a point. So these bidders, that is those who won the bid, were resorting to at times coercion and violence as well. They were resorting to coercion, resorting to violence. They were collecting as much taxes as possible from the actual cultivators of. But what was the outcome? So when the exploitation, the outcome was the fall in agricultural produce or productivity. That was the outcome. The outcome of this system was fall in agricultural produce or productivity. The point is, since the actual uh, cultivator of the land was subjected to huge taxation, since the actual cultivator of the land was subjected to the burden of a tax, the excessive burden of a tax, the actual cultivators of the land began losing interest in the agricultural operation. They began to lose interest in agriculture. The actual cultivator of the land started investing less and less on their land, as a result of which the productivity itself began to decline. So, the whole point which I'm trying to convey is the actual cultivators of the land, because of the huge uh, taxes to which they were subjected to, they began losing interest in agriculture. They began to invest less and less on the land, as a result of which the entire productivity in agriculture began to suffer. So this was the outcome of this particular system. So the point is, I just told you, as a result of this exploitation, there was a significant decline in agricultural productivity. So this reduced agricultural productivity not only severely affected the food supply, is reduced agricultural productivity not only severely affected the food supply, it also impacted the British. It also impacted the British. This was because uh, since there was not much of a surplus available in the market, the British were also not able to procure the agricultural produce and export the same. as a result of which profits of East India Company also began to suffer. Let me repeat this point once again. So this reduced agricultural output not only affected the availability of food that anyway happened, but the point is it also began to negatively affect the British. The point is East India Company was a trading company. So greater the trade, greater are the chances of the company making profits. If it indulges in more trade, the chances of they making the profit or greater profit increases. But the point is, since there was not much availability of a surplus in the market, agrarian surplus in the market, the British were not able to procure the goods and export the same, as a result of which the profit margins of the company also began to suffer. So the whole point is the system was not beneficial to anyone. It was not benefiting anyone. It neither benefited the peasants, the actual cultivators of the land, nor the British were getting benefited in any way in this particular system. That's the point. So the whole point is it was in the year 1770 AD the British got transformed from merely a trading company to a territorial power. Immediately thereafterwards, the British started collecting land revenue from the peasants, and in this connection, the British in 1772 introduced a system known as bidding system, and this system was in operation between 1772 to 1793. For about 20 years, this system was in existence. What is this bidding system? What were the defects of the system? Which we have just discussed those points. Basically, the system it, it only benefited uh, the officers, the friends, family members, and relatives of the officers of East India Company. The East India Company itself was a major in system. Of course, this system also was greatly disadvantageous to the actual cultivators of the point. So therefore, there were many defects in this particular system. So therefore, to overcome the defects of the bidding system, uh, the British introduced a new land revenue system known as the Zamindari system. To overcome the defects of the bidding system, the British had introduced a new land revenue system known as the Zamindari system the year 1793. So I already told you in the introduction itself that the British had introduced three different land revenues in the country. One is the Zamindari system that was introduced in 1793. Then the British later introduced another system known as the Ryotwari system, 1820. And third, they have introduced another system called Mahalwari system in 1833. So the whole point is, the topic of today's discussion is Zamindari system. What we have discussed till now is the background details of the Zamindari system. Why did the British introduce this system? What was the rationale behind introducing this system in 1793 is what we have discussed so far. So come to this Zamindari system. So Zamindari system. So before we discuss the features of Zamindari system, take a look at some factual information relating to this. Zamindari system is also called as permanent settlement system. Why is it called permanent settlement? We will discuss shortly. It was introduced in 1793. So it was introduced in about 19% of British. So basically, this Zamindari system was introduced only in about 19% of the territory that was under the direct control of the British. Only 19% of the territory of India that was under the direct control of the British, only in that region this system was introduced. Which areas? Basically, this system was introduced in Bihar, Bengal, Odisha, Varanasi, and the northern part of Karnataka. northern part of Karnataka. So in these regions of India, the Zamindari system was introduced. And it was the system was basically designed by two British officers. One is Sir John Shore, second is James Grant. Sir John Shore and second is James Grant. And this system was introduced in 1793 AD. And the Governor General of India during that time was Lord Cornwallis. Cornwallis was the Governor General, and during his time only the system was introduced. At a point. Now take a look at the features of the Zamindari system. What are its features? Basically, in the Zamindari system, in the Zamindari system, the local landlords, the local landowners, that is the large landowners at the level of a village, were recognized as the owners of the entire land of that village. So, for example, there is a village in which, say, there are some 1,000 acres of land. So roughly speaking, there is a village has, say, roughly 1,000 acres of land, and there is a landlord who owns maybe 50 acres of a land. So this large landlord of a village was declared as the owner of the entire land available in that particular village. This position was created by the British only. So basically, the local landlord, who also was referred to as Zamindar, was recognized as the owner of the land available in the village. Owner of the land, the entire land available in the village. So at times, the size of the point is owner of the land, these territories at times ranged from small villages to large tracts of land encompassing multiple villages or even entire district. So the point is, I am talking about the jurisdiction of each of these zamindari. Let me repeat this point once again. In the system, the local landlord of an area was recognized as the owner of the entire land available in that area, owner of the entire land available in that area, available in an area. So what does this area mean? This area at times means just a small village. At times this area also means multiple villages. At times this area also means the entire land available in the district. That's my point. So basically, the local landlord was recognized as the owner of the entire land available in an area. Area, it could be just a small village, could be multiple villages. At times it could be the entire land available in the entire district. That's my point. So technically speaking, the point is these zamindars were basically the intermediaries between the government and the peasants. Basically, though they were declared as the owners of the land, technically speaking, they were still not the actual owners. They just were the intermediaries between the government and the actual cultivators of the land. They were declared, the local landlords were declared as the owners of the entire land, but technically speaking, they were not the owners of the land. They more or less acted as intermediaries between the government and the actual cultivators of the land. At a point. So that was the first feature of this zamindari system. But mind you, who created the position of a zamindar? It was the British only. It was the British who declared the large landowner of a village as the owner of the entire land available in the village at a point, and this position was created by British only. Then the point is the government thereafterwards, take a look at the second feature. The government thereafterwards fixed revenue to be collected annually from the zamindars. So the point is the British also fixed the revenue to be collected annually from each zamindar. The British also fixed land revenue to be collected from each zamindar, to be collected annually from each zamindar. And the British also promised that it would not increase the land revenue annually. So the point is the British promised to collect a fixed amount of land revenue annually from each zamindar. It also promised not to increase the land revenue each year. And therefore, it is for this reason this Zamindari system also came to be referred to as permanent settlement system. What do you mean by permanent? Permanent means the British had promised that it would not increase land revenue rate each year. It would continue to collect the same land revenue rate from each zamindar annually. Uh, Basically, the British promised to collect fixed revenue from each zamindar annually. It promised not to increase the land revenue annually, and therefore this system came to be referred to as permanent settlement system. I hope I am clear. So third is the rights of zamindari. So the point is, what rights did the zamindars have? The point is, in the capacity of the owners of the land, the zamindars had the right, or was given the right, to collect land revenue from the peasants of their zamindari. That is, what rights did the zamindars have? The point is, in the capacity of the owners of the land, each zamindar was given the right to collect land revenue from each peasant of their zamindari. Would collect land revenue from each peasant of their zamindar. This was another feature of this system. Fourth one. So the point is, whatever revenue that was collected by the zamindar from the peasants had to be shared with the British in the ratio of 1:10. This was another feature. That is, the land revenue collected by the zamindar from the peasant, land revenue collected by the zamindar was kept fixed. That is, the zamindar was also expected to collect fixed amount of revenue from the peasant, and the revenue so collected by the zamindar from the peasant has to be shared between the zamindar and the British in the ratio of 1:10. That is about that is 10 out of 11 parts had to be given away to the British, and only 1 out of the 11 parts can be retained by the zamindar. So about 90% of the amount so collected by the zamindars had to be deposited with the British, and the zamindars were allowed to retain only 10% of the amount they had collected from the peasants. That's my point. So this system exists, revenue system. So what was the revenue sharing model? Point is, the British can collect money, a fixed amount of money from each individual peasant, and whatever money that was collected by the zamindar, he had to share the same with the British in the ratio of 1:10. That is, about 90% has to be deposited with the British, 10% can be retained by the zamindar. The point is, the zamindar had to compulsorily deposit this amount at a fixed time period. The point is, the zamindar had to deposit this money at a specified time period. In case if the zamindar failed to tax, in case the zamindar failed to pay the tax due to the British in time, in case if the zamindar failed to pay the land revenue due to the British in time, then in such a case, the government would have the right to take away the zamindari or take over the zamindari and sell and sell the same zamindari in auction to some other zamindar. Let me repeat this point once again. In case if the zamindar failed to repay, or let me repeat, in case if the zamindar failed to pay the tax due to the British in time, in case if he failed, then in such a case, then the government would have the right to take over the zamindari and sell the same in auction to some other zamindar. This right was given to the British at a point. That was another important feature of the zamindari system. Take a look at the fifth feature. So there was also a provision for a written agreement between the zamindar and the actual cultivator of the land, that is the Ryat. Ryat is the peasant. So the Zamindari system also had a provision for a written agreement between the Zamindar and the actual cultivator of the land. That is, this agreement shall have details like the tax or percentage of land revenue that needs to be paid by the Ryat to the Zamindar, the due period, that the due date for the payment of land revenue, the percentage of a produce that needs to be paid, all those details shall be written down uh, in this written agreement. Let me provide this point once again. The Zamindari system also had a provision for a written agreement between the zamindar and the actual cultivator of the land. The zamindar and the actual cultivator of the land. At a point. So the point is, the zamindar uh, had to enter into a written agreement with the actual cultivator of the land, and this agreement should have details like the due date of payment of land revenue by the peasant. It also should contain the percentage of produce that needs to be paid by the actual cultivator of the land to the zamindar, etc., etc. All these details were required to be written down in this particular agreement. This provision also exists. Then take a look at another provision. So the point is, the zamindari was made hereditary. The zamindari was made hereditary. In other words, the point is, the zamindari could be inherited by the children of the zamindar, and the children of the zamindar could continue to collect land revenue from the peasants of their zamindari. The point is, the zamindars could sell their zamindari, they could even mortgage their zamindari, they could even transfer their zamindari. Transfer to whom? They can even transfer their zamindari to their children. At a point, in other words, the zamindari was made, uh, the zamindari can be inherited, could be inherited. This feature also existed in this system. That's the point. So the point is, let us take a look at the features of zamindari system. Let us briefly take a look at what all we have discussed so far. I told you it was in the year 1772 AD that the British got transformed from a trading company to a territorial power. Immediately thereafterwards, they started collecting land revenue. Between 1772 to 1793, the British collected land revenue through a system known as a bidding system. But that bidding system was found to be full of defects. And to overcome the defects of the bidding system, the British introduced a new system known as the Zamindari system. Take a look at the features, a quick recap of what we have discussed so far. One, basically, the local landlords were declared as owners of the entire land available in an area. The area could be just a small village, it could be a group of villages, or it could be a whole district. So the land available in the whole district was declared as belonging to that of a zamindar, a landlord who was named zamindar. At a point. So in other words, the position of a zamindar was created by British only. Position of zamindar was created by British only. Then the point is the zamindars were required to pay land revenue, a fixed land revenue annually to the British. The zamindars were required to pay a fixed land revenue annually to the British. And the British promised to the zamindars that they would not increase land revenue annually. The British promised to collect land revenue at a fixed rate, the same rate. At the point, this was promised by the British. Third, third, the zamindars in turn were given the right to collect land revenue from the actual cultivators of the land. This was the third feature. Fourth, whatever revenue that was collected by the zamindar had to be shared between the zamindar and the British in the ratio of 1:10. Has to be shared between the zamindar and the British, the ratio of 1:10. This was also another feature. And fifth is there was a provision for a written agreement between the zamindar and the actual cultivator of land, that is the Ryot. And sixth, the zamindar was given the right to sell his zamindari, mortgage his zamindari, and even to transfer his zamindari to his heirs, that is to his children, that is to his legal representative. At a point, this feature was given. So the point is, take a look at some. Let us take a look at uh, the point is some aspects of this particular system. So basically, it was Cornwallis, the Governor General in 1793, who introduced this system. And basically, he introduced the system with all the good intentions. He was of the view, basically, Cornwallis was of the view that this system was going to benefit everyone. Cornwallis introduced the system in 1793 and he introduced the system with good intentions. He was of the view that this system was going to benefit everyone. It would be win-win for everyone. It would be a win for the British, it would be a win for the Zamindars, it would be a win even for the peasants. So he was of the view that the system would benefit everyone. So what was the British policy? British policy is that British declared they would not collect extra amount each year from the zamindar. So the British policy that was that the British declared that they will not collect extra amount each year from the zamindar. This was what was declared by the British. Thus, the British declared that they would collect a fixed amount annually from each zamindar. Basically, they declared that they will not go for increasing land revenue each year. So, what impact would it create on the zamindars? So basically, since the zamindars are not paying extra each year to the British, it was expected that the zamindars will also not collect. It was expected that the zamindars will also not collect extra from each peasant from the peasants each year. Since the zamindars themselves are not paying extra to the British, it was expected that in turn the zamindar will also not collect extra from the peasants each year. That was what was expected. So what effect would it create on the peasant? What effect would it create on the peasant? So basically, since the peasant is not uh, paying extra each year to the zamindar, it was hoped that it would greatly encourage the peasants to grow more, because in case if the peasant works hard and grows more, the entire surplus would remain with the peasant and would not be required for the it would not be necessary for the peasant to share his extra produce with the zamindar. Let me repeat this point once again. So what effect would it create on the peasants? The point is, it was believed that since the peasant himself is not paying extra each year to the zamindar, it was hoped that the peasants would grow more, they would produce a surplus uh, and keep the surplus with themselves. And the point is, it was hoped that uh, since the peasants were not required to pay extra each year to the zamindar, it was hoped that it will serve as an encouragement to the peasants to cultivate more and use the surplus for their own benefit. That's the point. So it was hoped that ultimately it will serve as an encouragement to the peasants to grow more and use the surplus for himself. That was the effect it was believed would be created on the peasants. Then what would be the ultimate result? Basically, one must not forget that the East India Company was a trading company. So its profit depended on trade. Greater the trade, greater are the chances of the company making profits. Basically, the British hoped that the British will be in a position to purchase the surplus produce from the market and export them, thereby earn profit. The British believed that they will be in a position to purchase the surplus from the market and export the same and thereby make profit. That was what the British had hoped for. So basically, Cornwallis introduced this system with all the good intentions. He hoped that this system would benefit the British because he thought that he would be in a position, because he thought that the British would be in a position to uh, to purchase goods from the market and export the same and thereby make profit. Uh, Cornwallis also hoped that since the British are not collecting extra each year from the zamindars in turn will also not collect extra money each year from the peasants, and therefore this will serve as a motivation to the peasants to grow more. It will serve as a motivation to the peasants to grow more. That's the point. So the point is, Cornwallis believed that this system will benefit everyone. So it was all the good intentions that Cornwallis had introduced this particular. But what was the outcome of the permanent settlement system? So the point is, though this system was introduced with all the good intentions, this system created too many problems to the actual cultivators of land. Let us take a look at the problems that this system created to the actual cultivators of. One, there was absolutely no security of tenure. So basically, the position of the peasant was uh, the point is there was absolutely no security of tenure to the peasant. So their position uh, was that of tenants at the will of the zamindar. That is, in case if the zamindars did not want uh, did not want did not like any of the peasant, in such a case the peasants could be removed from the land at the will of the. So basically there was absolutely no security of tenure. So the position of the peasant was at the mercy of the zamindar. In case if the zamindar wanted, the peasant was allowed to cultivate over the land. But in case if the zamindar did not want, in such a case, the peasant was mercilessly removed from the land, that is, evicted from the land. At a point. So, therefore, there was absolutely no security of tenure to the actual cultivators of. Second, there was a lot of harassment of the people. So the point is, the zamindars at times resorted to coercion. They resorted to even physical violence in case the peasants failed to pay the land revenue amount in time to the zamindar. The zamindars at times resorted to coercion. They even resorted to physical violence in case the peasants failed to pay the land revenue in time to the zamindar. So this there was always a threat of harassment on the peasants. That's the point. This also was the second major threat. Third, non-implementation of a written agreement. I told you that there was a provision for a written agreement between there was a provision for a written agreement between the zamindar and the actual cultivator of the land. But the point is that a written agreement was very rarely implemented. That's the point. So therefore, in the absence of this written agreement, since there was no written agreement, exploitation of the peasant at the hands of the zamindars was easier. Since there was no written agreement between the zamindar and the peasant, the exploitation of the peasant at the hands of the zamindar was much easier. This was what happened. That's the point. That was another major defect. Absentee landlordism was another major problem. So the point is, the zamindars, they mostly lived in urban areas. So there was none to actually take care of the land. So the point is, the landlords were interested, that is, the zamindars were interested uh, in only collecting land revenue from the peasants, and they seldom showed any interest in improving the land. Point is, the landlords, they were interested only in collecting land revenue. They hardly showed any interest in taking any steps to improve improve the facilities uh, in the land, like say providing quality manure, providing good quality seeds. The point is, the landlords did not show interest in improving the agriculture. They were merely interested in collecting land revenue, and they never ever used to show interest in uh, uh, increasing. Uh, they never showed any interest in improving the agricultural practice. So that is what that's what we call as the absentee landlordism. So absentee landlordism was another major problem in the zamindari areas. Then fifth, we also have high initial revenue assessment. That is, it's true that the British did not demand extra each year. It is true that the government did not demand uh, extra amount each year from the zamindars. But the fact of the matter was, initial assessment itself was kept very high. The initial assessment itself was kept very high. For example, 45% of the produce uh, was taken away by the British as their share. Another 50%, 15% of the produce was taken away by the zamindar as their share, whereas the actual cultivator of the land was left only 40% produce. So basically, though the uh, British did not go for increasing the land revenue rate annually in the Zamindari system, but the point is, the initial assessment itself was kept very. As a result, the peasants were under severe burden of high taxation. They were under the burden of very high taxation. So the actual cultivators of the land were left only with 40% of the produce, whereas 60% of the produce was taken away by both the British and the Zamindar. The point. So that was another major defect of this particular system. So this system neither was greatly beneficial to the Zamindar. System neither greatly benefited the Zamindar. It was because the Zamindars were also under pressure to pay land revenue time to the British. They too under great stress to pay land revenue time to the British. But in case if they failed, uh, their zamindari could be taken over by the British and sold in auction to some other zamindar. This threat always hanged. This threat always remained for the zamindars. So the point is, this system neither greatly benefited the zamindars as well. They too under great stress to pay the land revenue in time, but in case if they failed, uh, there was always a threat of their zamindari being taken over by the British, sold in auction to some other zamindar. That's my point. So these were the various aspects of this particular system. So the whole point which I'm trying to convey is this system possibly benefited only one individual, only one entity, that is the British. The system neither benefited the peasant nor the system benefited the, the zamindars. Possibly it benefited only one entity, in this case the English East India Company. So that's all about this system. This topic is very important. It is important both for prelims. It is also important from mains. So that's all for today. See you in the next class.